Hey guys, so I had to do the Oliver Sacks, the Disembodied Lady chapter. So Sacks starts out by talking about the sixth sense, which he describes as the part of our body, the muscles, tendons, joints, that we don't give a second thought to. When we are walking to Whitaker, we're not constantly thinking that we have to use this muscle and that muscle to move our legs to walk to Whitaker. So from that, it's the sixth sense. We are not aware of it naturally. So he called this sixth sense the proprioception, and that it's because of this that we feel like our body is our own and that we own it, we have property over it, we know it's a part of us. So he then goes on to talk about this girl, Christina, who went into the hospital for gallstones but left with something much worse. So she goes in and she's feeling fine, but she has this dream and she doesn't feel right, and her dream becomes a reality. She wakes up and she says that she doesn't feel right, she can't grasp things, she's dropping it. But the psychiatrist said that it's just anxiety hysteria, where she's just nervous about her operation. So after the operation, she's feeling even worse. She feels like she can't feel her body. And this is the part she says, I can't feel my body, I feel weird, disembodied. So this is the first time she uses the word disembodied, which I think is a really unique term to use. If you haven't experienced these sensations, you don't know how to call it. So the fact of feeling disembodied is something, a concept we're not used to naturally. So she describes it as her state of body and state of mind are two completely things. Her mind and body are completely separate from each other. And she doesn't feel like a physical whole. So this was because the parental lobes were not getting their usual sensory information. So her parental lobes were working, but they had nothing to work with. So because of this, she had no muscle, tendon, or joint sense whatsoever, and she also had a slight loss of other sensory modalities like light touch, temperature, pain, and some motor fibers as well. So it's predominantly position sense, proprioception, which has sustained the damage. So Sachs goes on to talk about the sense of body is in three main parts: the vision, the balance organs, and the proprioception. And that if any one of those things goes out of place, or in her case completely lost, that they don't work in unison, and it throws the whole system off. So Christina then says, it's like my body is blind. My body can't see itself if it's lost its eyes, right? So I have to watch it be its eyes. So what she means by this is that she actually has to physically watch her body, herself, her arm, to do a specific motion. If she was to hold a glass, she has to watch her hand, she has to physically think about how she's going to grip the cup, move it up, and everything. So at first she couldn't do anything without using her eyes. She felt helpless. She would collapse if she didn't look at her legs. She would not be able to sit up and everything. So she called it an almost painful consciousness and care, which I thought was a really unique way of putting it. So she also had to focus on how she was going to speak, how she was going to use her vocal cords, how she was going to move her lips, use expression, which to us comes naturally, but to her she had to really think about doing all of those things at once just to communicate with people. And if she lost her attention for even a slight moment, if she was to look away because a car passed by, she would completely fail almost. She would collapse because she wasn't constantly thinking about how to keep her body up. she feels that her body is dead and it's not hers, and she can't necessarily say that her body is hers. She can't appropriate it to herself. And she also goes on to describe how everyday tasks like getting on a bus and bumping into people and stumbling, how people would yell at her saying, "Are you blind? Are you deaf? What's wrong with you?" When she really just wants to say she can't feel anything, and she's forgotten what it's like to be normal. She compares herself to a pith frog, which is wow. So she does feel normal when she's in the car. She has the windows down and she can feel the wind on her face because she hasn't lost all that sense. But she doesn't feel normal otherwise. So she, later on as she lives through this, she feels she's getting better at gripping a cup, walking and everything, though it's still hard. So she says that she's succeeding in operating but not in living. So Sachs goes on to explain that the sixth sense is one of the most powerful things in our body, that even though we don't give a second thought to it, it's one of the most fundamental parts of our body. And he ends with what I thought was kind of funny. He says, "Though most, unlike Christine, can hope to get better soon as they stop poisoning themselves." So other people have experienced this as well, but that's just because of an overdose in B6. So as soon as they stop doing that, they could regain everything again, which I thought it was funny the way he worded it. So that was chapter 3.